Good evening, Drew.
I sincerely hope that my internet holds out for this
Okay. Having a rough time over there?
all week, buddy. I've
Oh,
had
no.
I've had a couple outages this week, and
Ugh.
I, I'm I don't know why. I have I am a former Wide Open West, also known as WoW customer. I was with them for years. They were outstanding for the price and the speed that they were offering. No other provider in my area could come close. And when we moved, we kept WoW.
Okay.
WoW got bought, and they are now owned by a company called Breezeline.
Breeze line.
Breezeline.
Breeze line.
Breezeline. Breeze right down them
Huh.
lines with
Huh.
with your ones and zeros.
I've never heard of that before. Breeze line.
Breezeline. I guess they're in a bunch of
Breeze
states.
line. Okay.
Because that is the natural kind of end state of capitalism, is that you just keep buying things. um, but yeah, I've had really bad internet experiences this week, and as someone who works at home, like, that's my livelihood, and I can do most of my job, like attending calls and things, just by sort of tethering to my phone or just using my work phone to join a Teams meeting. But when I'm actually trying to get legitimate work done, that is exceptionally annoying. And then just today, even I was trying to play a little bit of Destiny, and just constantly getting dropped from servers and things. And I can physically watch my modem reboot. Like, it just sort of does that
Oof.
thing where all the lights go out and then it comes back on. And I don't think it's the modem, because what I tried doing, just out of like sheer desperation, is I unscrewed the cable from it and power cycled it a few times and let it run for a while, and nothing happened. But it's receiving some kind of like signal that just makes it want to reboot. So I'm crossing my fingers. If I don't reply for a while, or I suddenly drop, that might be why. It's been stable for about the past hour and a half, because I was just
Okay.
hanging out with Mandy upstairs, and surfing TikTok while she was watching something streaming on Netflix, and it seems to have solidified, but I don't know, buddy. I don't know.
So I don't want to get into it too much, but speaking of Netflix, have you watched any of The Sandman yet?
No, and that is well, it sounds like you
Okay.
have.
I've watched 4 episodes so far.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's. I don't want to talk about that yet, because
Yeah,
I want
I
to
don't-
watch it.
Mhm.
I heard it's good.
Uh,
Okay.
So far, I have been extremely impressed.
Okay.
I have read some reviews of people saying that it's just kind of mediocre, but like, dude, it's exactly what I wanted out of a Sandman television show. I mean, I need you to watch it. We'll talk about it after you've watched it, but so far, 2 thumbs up from me. So
Well, I read a couple review. I read a couple spoiler-free reviews, even though I sort of know what happens.
Well, I mean, they do tweak up some of the stories and introduce some characters earlier, but it's all for the better.
Okay.
Yeah.
And apparently there is going to be a second season.
Yeah, from what I understand, it doesn't cover all of the comics.
Okay. That was sort of my
yeah.
biggest outstanding questions. How many episodes is it?
There's 10 episodes, I think.
Okay, so they're. I mean, I feel like they could get through most of. Well, okay, 2. I feel like maybe 2 seasons is probably enough, depending on which
Yeah.
direction they take it. It is on my list to do tomorrow. I'm desperately behind in some other things I needed to get done this weekend for reasons we'll get into later.
Okay, yep.
But if I can get through all of my yard chores and everything else that I need to do tomorrow, that is like top of my list, is to start watching that. Because I know that I have been awaiting it. And honestly, it kind of snuck up on me. As someone who's been waiting for it, I didn't even realize it had launched until I started seeing some articles online.
Yeah.
All right. I want to know, because I have been waiting to hear about this. You got your new MacBook Air.
I did.
Let's hear about
I
it.
very much did. So first of all, I absolutely love it. It is a great laptop. Let's just start. I have a little bit of. I took some notes. So first things first. I am slightly disappointed in the color. It's still a beautiful laptop. I just wish it was more blue. The brighter the room is, the more black it looks, if that makes sense.
It kind of does. How's the
Yeah.
fingerprint situation?
It is it does get fingerprints all over it. You can see it, but it just makes me want to clean it more. So you know, I take a little bit of spray on there and wipe it down with the microfiber cloth, and the fingerprints come right off. Yeah, it does. It is true. It does show fingerprints quite a bit. I'm used to like lighter laptops, so I've always had silver Macs because that's the right color for Macs.
Sure.
If I have if I have a biggest complaint about the color is like there's not enough contrast between the aluminum and the keyboard, the individual keys of the keyboard. While they do illuminate, and it's really not of a problem, I just don't like the look of it, of having these like glowing letters kind of coming off out of the deep pool of blackness. But that's a me thing. I bet you there's a lot of people that look at that and go, "Wow, that looks really freaking cool." Overall, like I'm happy I made the choice to do midnight blue. I think Apple needs to do more colors. Like, why can't we have purple laptops, Drew? So I'm glad I bought it. It is beautiful, especially like in my office right now where I kind of don't have a whole lot of lights on, and it looks more kind of like a really deep like royal blue. It looks really pretty. This is my first Mac. This is my first Mac that has a notch for the display. I don't mind it. They've kind of tweaked it a little bit that like the menu bar kind of is the same height as the notch, and it kind of just disappears and you don't really lose it. And I guess technically you actually gain that many more pixels on the screen because they expanded out the bezels, and the bezels are, super like ridiculously crazy thin. The overall like the size, the thickness, the weight, it is near perfect. It is wonderful to pick up and hold. It hardly weighs anything. It's incredibly thin. And honestly, like I found that like the little things that I would do, like checking my email in the evening, or maybe watching some Netflix on the couch on my iPad, or those kinds of things that I would typically do with my iPad in the evening. I now just grab my MacBook Air because I like it better. I mean, I have an 11-inch. I have the new M1 Mac. Too many things are the same. I have the new M1 iPad Air, and I love that thing, but I love my MacBook Air more. And the things I normally would do with my iPad, I find myself reaching for the MacBook instead of that. The battery is ridiculous. It's absolutely, it lasts forever, Drew. Like, it is comical how long the battery lasts. It's just absolutely insane. The screen is nice. It's brighter than my other Macs. Like, obviously it doesn't have like the high dynamic range or like the 120 hertz of like the pros, but it's fine. It's a really good screen. MagSafe is great. It's like, obviously, like a lot of the times I have it plugged into my Thunderbolt dock that use on my LG Ultrafine 5K. So a lot of times I'm not using the MagSafe, but I have used it. It is really good, though it has totally messed up my muscle memory because I'm used to the USB ports, or technically Thunderbolt ports, being in a certain place.
Right.
And now they're like an inch further closer to me because of MagSafe. But I really think it's, especially on a laptop that only has 2 ports, I think giving people the option to not have to have one of those ports for charging is really, really smart. It's great. The headphone jack is on the wrong side. It's on the right side. It should be on the left. Apple should know this by now. They keep doing it. They're wrong. Headphone jack should be on the left side of everything because a lot of headphones, especially headphones, only have one cable. The cable comes out of the left. So not that I use the headphone jack on it a lot, but it still angers me that it's in the wrong place.
Mm.
And the thing that you want to know the most, it's ridiculously fast. Obviously, like there's computers out there that can go faster. I don't push my laptops extremely hard. You know, I do a little bit of like development tinkering on them. The most CPU intensive thing I do on them is I use an application called, what is it called? I should have wrote this down. It's called Isotope. Isotope RX9 audio editor. I run the audio for this podcast through a filter to kind of just make it sound a little better. I'm comparing this to my like 10 core i9 Intel MacBook that I used to use before this. This computer does that audio rendering in about 25% less time, which is incredible considering this is only an 8 core. 4 of those are efficiency cores, so it does it faster, and it has absolutely no fan, and it's great. I'm extremely happy with this purchase. It's a great laptop. Ooh, the speakers on it do suck. They suck. They're really, really bad.
Interesting.
So I have an M1 MacBook Air from work that I use.
Mm-hmm.
Those speakers, what they have is they on either side of the keyboard, there's a little speaker grill, and the speakers on the left and right of the keyboard.
Mm-hmm.
This computer, the speakers are I think they're like in the hinge. So where like the screen and the keyboard fold into each other, that hinge. So they're kind of like tucked in the back, and they just sound real tinny.
That's not good.
No, it's not good, but I do use the speakers on them not very often, to be honest. Like a lot of times I'm plugged into something else, so I'm either using like headphones or the speakers in my LG 5K or my AirPods. So like
that's interesting because I don't think I've ever intentionally used the speakers on my current Mac.
Yeah, it doesn't, for me personally, I don't use them very often. I just don't. And like usually if audio is coming out of those speakers, my first thought is, oh, I'm doing something wrong.
I made a mistake.
Yeah. That's not right.
Yeah.
So it's really good. The keyboard's nice. I like having the full height function row. The bigger Touch ID button is really good. It's extremely fast. I've actually been putting it through its paces pretty hardcore. And it is yet to disappoint me at all. I don't think it's throttled at all. It's never really even gotten like warm. Obviously, there's no fan for me to hear, which is like that's the big difference, right? Because even like my Intel Mac, like doing basic stuff like talking to you and recording it, if I took the ear cup off of my headphone, I would hear the fan running.
Sure.
It's absolutely completely quiet because there's no fan. It's wonderful. Like I know a lot of people are all about that like MacBook Pro lifestyle because it's got Pro in the name, but like unless you're like doing like regular hardcore like video editing or you're really, really, really pushing the computer, man, like the MacBook Air is the computer to beat. It's perfect. Except for all the things I said about it that aren't perfect. So it's really good. It's really, really good, Drew.
Well,
I'm very happy.
First of all, I'm very happy that you're happy with your purchase. And you are the person that I would, not just, how do I say this? I would very carefully consider a purchase, especially if it's something you're excited about, because we have a lot of similar tastes. Now, that being said, you are someone that is coming into this MacBook Air M2 from a non-Apple Silicon-based MacBook Pro, which is exactly what I would be doing.
Yes.
And granted, I know that you have a work MacBook Air, but I get the impression that is primarily an email and web machine.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah. Like the most important things I run on that computer is Outlook and Edge.
and probably Teams.
Yeah, you're right. Yes, Outlook, Teams, and Edge. In fact, that is pretty much my like. I use Spaces for like virtual desktops.
Same.
And my primary virtual desktop has 3 applications running on it at all times, and those are Teams, Outlook, and Edge. And that's where I spend a majority of my time because I sold out and I'm a middle manager.
That's okay. That's okay. So you did touch on a couple things that, and again, I have made up my mind that I am not going to go buy this thing until I can physically use one for, I think within 10 minutes I would know.
Yeah.
But you touched on a couple things that would be important for me to know. Now you mentioned the notch. The notch is not new to the Macs. I think it was on the previous generation MacBook Pros, right?
It is, yeah. All the laptops that they've kind of redesigned have had the notch.
Yeah. So for those that don't know what we're talking about, on the screen, just like on your phone, just like on our phones.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just like on an iPhone, there is a black section on the screen that holds the camera. It also holds a speaker. But on the MacBook Pro, I think it just on the
microphone.
MacBook Air.
Yeah.
Yeah. Does it have the microphone too?
I think it's a camera and a microphone in there, I think.
Yeah. So there's this little sliver cut out from the top of your monitor. Now, my first question is this. I'm sure Apple is smart enough that if I was using an application that had a very large menu bar, cough, word, cough.
Yeah.
Or how does the notch handle that? Does it just move everything over to the right?
It does. Yeah.
Okay.
It just moves everything over to the other right of honestly, like I'm looking at it now and I opened up Word and moved it over to that screen and the menu bar actually fits to the entire left of the notch.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So it doesn't even go over. But on things like Xcode where it is a little bit bigger, it does kind of, if it needs to, it will move things over to the right of the notch. Same thing if you have like a lot of menu bar like icons, a lot of like, menu bar apps that have little icons in there. If you have a lot of them, it will kind of spread them across. Though I do recommend the great app Bartender. If you do have a lot of things that kind of are running all the time, it's a great app to kind of manage and hide things you don't necessarily want to see all the time. But yeah, it's really smart about it. And the notch lives only in the menu bar, right? So it never comes into your content. It's always in that, persistent, always there menu bar. It's like one of those things where I've just honestly kind of just forgot it's there already. You notice it for like the first hour you're using it and you're like, "Ooh, I wonder what happens to put my mouse cursor up there." Oh, it disappears. Oh, it jumps from one side to the other. How cute. And then you're like, "Meh, I'm done."
All right. So, okay, that's good. And I'm sure that it's one of those things that wouldn't really bother me. That was just more of a mild curiosity. Now, here's the bigger workflow question I have. This is a 12-inch screen.
No, it's technically 13.6, I think.
Okay. So again, the primary state of my computer is it's hooked up to my LG monitor. Mm-hmm. It is on a laptop stand off to the left, and that's where I run, even though I use Spaces for my virtual desktops and I'm flipping back and forth on my monitor. On my laptop screen, that's where Teams lives.
Okay.
So like a typical workday for me is I've got Teams displayed on the laptop monitor, and then primary applications, terminal windows, web browsers, email, whatever I'm working on, VS Code, whatever's open is open on the monitor. And I can flip between my virtual desktops and do all that stuff. So I guess how hard is it to sort of go to the smaller screen?
So obviously, I'm coming from a 16-inch MacBook Pro, my personal laptop. Though I have used my work laptop is a 13-inch MacBook Air, so it's actually technically a little bit smaller than this one. It does take a little bit of adjustment because you do have a little bit of less screen real estate. Obviously, for me, when I'm working, that screen is Spotify and not Teams. I leave Teams on the bigger monitor because, again, middle manager. It does take a little bit of getting used to, but for me, the trade-off of it is so small and so light and so cool and so quiet that the little bit of space that I do lose, or let's be honest, it's probably a significant amount of pixels if I actually counted them. It's worth it to me. I've really come to really enjoy the smaller form factor, the lightness, the fact that, like, you know, I've been kind of dabbling on a little bit of a side project that I'm almost ready to share with you, Drew. I know, a little teaser here, a little teaser.
Okay.
And I've been doing all of that, or actually, I've been doing a majority of that kind of just sitting on my couch while, like, the family's watching television on my MacBook Air. And it's great to be able to have a really good, like, you know, coding session and not have a sweaty lap when I'm done. So yeah.
Title. I had a working one there, but we're gonna.
I like that one better.
That's way better.
Mm-hmm. So one thing that I did, like, usually when I have Macs, my personal Macs, I use Migration Assistant to kind of copy the stuff from one Mac to another.
That's exactly where I was going next. How did you actually move everything over?
I basically didn't.
Okay.
Because I was afraid. I have read horror stories of Migration Assistant when you're moving from an Intel to a M2, especially like things you've installed via Homebrew and stuff like that. It just gets really confused and doesn't understand. So I kind of took the opportunity to say, okay, I'm changing architectures. I'm just going to re-download everything to make sure I get the, you know, Apple Silicon or Universal binaries. I'm going to reinstall everything via Homebrew. You know, I do have a pretty, like, regimented backup strategy. So, you know, I did have backups of my laptop. I did, like, copy over, like, my personal user directory and like things like my SSH keys and stuff I wanted to keep over kind of manually. And, you know, it did take a couple of days to get everything exactly how I wanted it and make sure everything's installed and launched. And, you know, I had all of my license keys and, like, things like Isotope have my auto editor. Like, I had to open up my old Mac and deactivate it and then reactivate it on my MacBook because they allow one machine active at a time. But whatever, it's fine. It's, you know, it's one of those applications where you have an application. It's like Adobe Creative Cloud. There's an application you launch to update it and license it that's separate from the application itself. It's one of those. Yeah. Very, very enterprisey or big business. But I took the opportunity kind of to clean slate, and I really wanted to make sure that if there was a, you know, Apple Silicon version of the application, that I had made sure that I downloaded that version and everything was working. And in fact, it wasn't even till, like, the second day I had it that I launched something. What was it? It was I use Authy for, like, my 2-factor authentication codes. And I finally, like, I usually, like, kind of just use it on my phone and just pull things up and type it, but I wanted to install the Authy desktop application, and I believe that's the application that I installed and launched where my Mac is like, hey fucker, that's an Intel app. We have to download it and install Rosetta for that to work.
Ooh,
I was
really?
like, oh
Authy?
yeah, that's a thing. Yeah.
Wow, I would have thought by now Authy would have would have had a native app.
You can tell when you're first launching an Intel app because the very first time you launch it, or like after it updates, it'll bounce in the dock for a couple of times before it launches.
Yeah.
And then after that, it's always fast because I think it's doing that, like, transpiling, like, on the first launch. But you can tell, you're like, ooh, that's an Intel app, isn't it? Now, once it launches, like, all the applications, like, they're fine. But yeah.
Yeah, I sort of go out of my way to do clean installs when I get new computers. On my PC, that is, like, just a no-brainer. I like to start fresh. If I do a new build, I don't even try. I don't even try. If I'm switching motherboards or chipsets or anything like that, I basically just bite the bullet and do a clean install. Pretty much all my save games, all my personal coding projects, most of that stuff is all cloud enabled.
Right.
OneDrive. I've got a NAS with my applications that I want, like the version of Audacity before it went sideways on us.
Right.
Stuff like that I have access to, right? There are very rare exceptions that I back stuff up before I reformat, unless there is a particular piece of code or something that I'm working on that I don't have in a repo yet, or recently, like if I'm screwing around with The Sims 4 or Elder Scrolls or Fallout and mods and things like that, I might take those folders and like compress them and back them up somewhere. But my default mode on my PC is just clean slate. Now the Mac is a slightly different proposition, because I was just looking at this yesterday in the folder on my Mac where I have several code repositories, presentations, customers examples. The presentations and documentation piece of that I can easily put on my OneDrive. The code repositories are a little bit different. I don't have all of those linked up to repos, so I would have to probably go through a lot of that stuff with a fine-tooth comb before I did a clean format. But outside of reinstalling the Office Suite, VS Code, Python, Homebrew, that was the other thing. Is Homebrew still a thing?
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That seems like a dumb question to ask.
Yeah. There was a period in time where it was kind of a weird state where like Homebrew. So Homebrew, if you don't know, it's a package manager. Things, if you think of like Linux, things like apt or yum, for the Mac, it's great. Especially like if you're using any kind of developer tool chain or any kind of CLI tools, it's a great way to install that. Yeah, like when Apple Silicon first came out, it was kind of like a weird transition period, but now, a lot of it itself is Apple Silicon native. A lot of the tools that you will download, either it will compile them right then and there, or get the Apple Silicon. But like if it is still Intel binaries, Rosetta takes care of all that, and it just works, and you don't have to worry about it or think about it. Yeah, it works. It works great. Like there is some speaking of my side project, the only kind of real thing I've run into problems with is with things like Docker.
Right.
Docker does run, but you have to be careful because you have to start really thinking about multi-architecture.
Sure.
Especially if you're using things like Docker Hub, you have to think about multi-architecture builds, because by default, if you build and run a Docker like a container image on your machine, it will be ARM based, because that's what it's running. So you have to be a little bit considerate of that. In that whole space, that is really the only problem that I hit with Apple Silicon. But if you follow the documentation or kind of change your workflow up a little bit, that really isn't a problem. Or it's a problem that you can easily work around.
Yeah, that is like the one thing. I have been working on some projects that are very, very container heavy right now. I think that's the only thing. That's the only thing holding me back. Now I have.
If you are building and pushing containers to a container registry from your Mac, you really have to think about how you're doing that.
Yep.
If you have some sort of pipeline that's building those containers for you and pushing them, you really don't.
Yep.
Because you can just, like, instead of pulling down the container, you could just build the container from your machine using the Docker file. We're getting really nerdy here. Everything works fine. It's really that I have a container image that I want to share with others or run other places. And if those other places also aren't ARM, you kind of have to really think about how you're going to do that.
Yeah. I think I would have a workflow that I could do that on. But now, surprisingly enough, how Docker handles it, I don't know if you've played around with this at all, but they have, like, if you do like Docker build, there's also like build X, which is their new extensions to it. And how it actually does it is it spins up another Docker image that you use to build your container images on that container image, and it supports multi-platform builds. It's actually really kind of clever how they did it. Yeah, I mean, we're super nerdy here, but there are solutions and ways around that. But yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I know we spent a lot of time talking about this, but it's still on my list of things to buy.
Yeah.
It truly is. I'm actually due. So where I work, they are on a 3-year hardware refresh cycle. When I got hired, I got handed a particular laptop that I honestly haven't turned on. Well, it's funny. Like here, just a quick anecdote. When we moved, I packed that up in a bag and put it in a tote. And it has sat in there since I have moved over a year ago. And my boss must have got some notification, or I showed up on more than likely, I showed up on a Power BI report of Drew is due for a hardware refresh. And he sent me a note and he was like, hey, can you take a picture of your asset tag and your laptop to make sure it's not like broken, so we can start the process of getting a new one. And I think there's a lot I want to talk about my job, but I can't right now because no, it's nothing bad. It's just I'm going through. There's some discipline change stuff that is happening, and when the dust has all settled, I will gladly talk about it. But there's actually quite a bit of unknowns. But anyway, I say all that in service of I think I might potentially be able to say I want a Mac. But that might be a tough sell. I might end up getting like a Lenovo or something decent, but something better than I have now, PC wise. And maybe that'll be where I do that work. I don't know, but I'm really happy for you. I'm still probably going to get one. It looks like the shipping, actually, I haven't checked in a few days. What are they shipping at now?
Oh, I haven't looked either because I have mine now.
Sure.
What are they doing now? So if you buy the base config, so
which I'm not.
What are they shipping at right now? End of the month, and if you customize it, it's still like end of the month. So yeah, well, August 24th to August 31st shipping. Pick up at the store August 31st. So
yeah, the configuration I would want would be the 8-core CPU, 8-core GPU. I would upgrade to 16 gigs of RAM. I would upgrade to 512. And I would get the 35-watt dual USB-C port charger.
Yeah, I did end up buying one of the I have the 67-watt and the 35-watt dual port for my laptop bag. Both are great. I bought an extra MagSafe cable. I did max all of mine out, so I have like 24 gigs of RAM, the 2 terabyte storage, which is actually really nice, Drew, because you know what I did? I use an application called Carbon Copy Cloner as part of my backup routine. I actually backed up my old laptop as a sparse bundle image and copied that image onto my new Mac.
Wow. Man,
so actually, so just until like that's, I don't need that. I no longer need that security blanket. I actually have the entire contents of my old laptop on my new laptop.
I did that for a while. I did that for a while where I basically copied the contents of my hard drive and like the stuff that like the repos and the last time I think I did like a full OS reinstall on that Mac, literally copied everything into a folder, compressed it, put it on my OneDrive, formatted, pulled it off, and like had a folder like Drew's old laptop was on my desktop.
I mean, it's actually been good because I realized there was a few things in my my .zsh RC file that I had customized that I forgot about. So I opened up that sparse bundle image, looked at that file, went, oh, I'm gonna copy that, done.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm super excited. I do want to see it. And I think I might actually get a chance to see it if I can tell you about the next thing we want to talk about.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay, a couple weeks ago, I mentioned that I had received a copy of the game Return to Dark Tower.
Yes.
For those of you that don't remember or don't listen, or just to reset, this is a board game. This is a board game that has app integration and has an electronic and mechanical tower that dominates the board. Like it sits in the middle of the board, and it is at its heart a cooperative game. So I had a chance to get it to the table. Friend of the show, Matt, stopped over to my house. We needed to get caught up on some stuff, and we hadn't talked in a while, and we both were sort of hankering to play some games. And I told him like, hey, why don't we just kind of get together? we'll get a pizza. We'll just kind of hang out. So it was an exceptionally last minute thing. This was the day after we recorded last week. And I jotted down some notes about the play experience. And I'm here to tell you, Paul, very, very, very enjoyable game.
So I was just looking. It's an 8.5 on Board Game Geek.
It's really good.
And that's that might as well be a 10 out of 10 on Board Game Geek.
It's Paul, it's very good. It's very fun. I'm not going to say it's the best game I own. I'm not even going to say it's the best game I've ever played, but it was exceptionally enjoyable. Now, before we go any further, I need to say that I'm always very, very cautious about app-driven games.
Right.
Up until this point, I have not had what I would call great experiences with app-driven games, and the app is a very large component of let me walk that back. The app is a part of this game.
Okay.
But I feel that this is the first game that I have played that has done app integration right. The other games that I have that are very heavily app-driven are Werewords, which even though I consider that to be lightly coupled, it is literally just there as basically an online dictionary, let's be honest, and a timer, okay? And it manages game state and stuff like that. On the complete other end of the spectrum is a game like Mansions of Madness 2.0.
Right, yeah.
And that game, I love the theme. I love the mechanics. I hate playing that game. I hate it. Yeah. It takes even with the app, it takes a long time to set up. I had Mansions of Madness version 1. And if you wanted to play that game, you would call up your friends and you would say, hey, we're going to play Mansions of Madness. Be at my house at 8. I would start setting up at 6.
Right, yeah.
Because if you were the overseer, you had to get all the tiles ready. You had to get all the cards and the tokens and all the events, and you had to have all your stuff together. And that might as well have been an asymmetrical game for the stuff that you had to do as an overseer versus a player. As a matter of fact, I think you might have played it with us once.
I did, yeah.
I think there was exactly 3 times I played that game, and once was with you in our old Shadowrun group.
Yeah.
It's
a great game, but you're right. Like there's a lot of stuff you have to do.
Yeah. Now the app solved a lot of those problems to where now every player in the game is just a player. The overseer is the app. It manages state. It's aware of how many monsters are on the board, what turn it is, what events need to happen, when they fire, what is the player's health, what's in their inventory. All that stuff is managed by the app, but it's one of those things where you are constantly passing an iPad or an iPhone around the table to sort of handle things. And there's a lot of stuff you got to read. And even though the app does its level best to sort of streamline the process, it is still very finicky.
Yeah.
So having said all that, though, Return to Dark Tower, the app gets out of your way. Now, let me just give you an example here. So I read the rules to this game, first of all, are very, very easy to understand. It's exceptionally easy to teach. If you've ever played a cooperative board game like Pandemic, this game is immediately going to click for you.
Okay.
On your turn, you have 3 actions, and you take them in any order. Like, move. There, you have a heroic action, and then you have a general action. And the whole game is just you moving around the board and trying to keep skulls off the board. So there's the main mechanic in this game is this concept of corruption. The board is divided up it's a circular board. It's divided up into 4 sections, like 4 slices of pie. And each one of those sections is called a kingdom. And in each kingdom, there are 4 buildings. What happens is skulls get added to these buildings. And if you ever need to place a 4th skull, very much like Pandemic, on a building, it gets destroyed and your hero takes a corruption. And one of the lose conditions of the game is that if any hero ever takes a 3rd level of corruption, the game's over. Everybody loses. You win and lose as a team, right? So these skulls are constantly being added to the board. Now the skulls they are like sort of the primary enemy of the game. Your characters will go around the board and perform heroic actions to take the skulls off of the board and put them back in the general supply because, surprise, surprise, if you run out of skulls in the general
lose.
supply, you lose, right? There's a whole lot of ways to lose the game. There's only one way to win, which we'll talk about in a minute. But the app, just like in Mansions of Madness, just like in Werewolves, is managing the state of the game. The app is aware of what turn it is. The app is aware of how many turns are in the game. It's played over a series of months, which are essentially rounds where players take turns. It is aware of what monsters are in the game. It is aware of what events need to happen in the game. And it is aware of what you've killed, what you haven't killed, stuff like that. Now, here's what's great about this. There's this huge tower. And again, we'll put a link in the show notes so you can see a picture, but there's this huge plastic tower that sits in the middle of the board. And it is Bluetooth enabled. It talks to the app. Now, what that means...
That's cool.
Now, what that means, Paul, is that I can take my turn and never touch the app. Because at the end of my turn, do you know what you do at the end of your turn?
What do?
You take a skull from the supply and you drop it in the tower.
Oh, and is
That's
that like communicate to the app for it to do its thing?
You're done.
Oh,
like you can take entire turns without touching the app. It's brilliant because now I don't need to like pass an app around or do anything. In fact, you only ever interact with the app when you're actively trying to do something for the main quest of the game. So the way you win the game is when you're doing setup, you basically choose which adversary are you fighting. There is minions, which are like monsters like spiders and dragons and orcs and mages and whatever. And they all have different levels and powers, and some are harder to defeat than others. And there's this concept of advantages, which I'll talk about in a minute. But in order to win the game, you have to beat the adversary. But before you can beat the adversary, you have to summon him or her.
Oh.
I hate to be gender normative. Summon them. And the game tells you, it's like, look, in order for you to summon the enemy, here's the goal you need to accomplish. Now, in our game, we had to have 4 items that all had the same word in their name. So our game was all about sort of trudging around the map, doing things, and basically cycling a deck of item cards till we got the things that we needed. Then we had to go to a specific space on the board, hold down a button on the app to say, I'm summoning the bad guy. And then you have to beat them in combat. And you have to do this before X number of turns have expired or you lose. So every game, that's the mechanic. Now, the condition to summon the big bad is different every game.
Okay.
But that's the general concept. Now,
so is that controlled by the app, or do you like pick the scenario going into it?
You do the setup through the app. So you basically say, which starting companion do you want? Because like there's these companion cards that grant you special abilities that you can get, and you can get more during the game, but you get to choose one to start. You also get to choose which adversary you're going to fight. Now, what that will mean is you will know who the adversary is going to be at the end of the game, and there's strategy about that, which I'll talk about in a minute when we talk about the advantages. But the condition to summon them will always be different. So the other thing that this game does, and again, this is not necessarily managed by the app, is there's this concept in this game of these things called advantages. You will have items and treasures and potions and maybe even character abilities that give you advantages. And anytime you're going into a fight with an enemy, the rules say, hey, calculate your advantages. And what that means is there's like 6 different types of advantages. There's melee advantages, magic advantages, stealth advantages, etc. The types of enemies you fight will have a weakness. For example, the orcs have a melee weakness. So if I have 3 melee advantages, what that means is that during the fight, I can basically change the win conditions up to 3 times. So the way it works is, if I go to a space and I'm going to fight orcs, I will go to that space and I will say, I'm going to fight these orcs. And then I'll go to the app and I'll say, battle. I'll hit the battle button on the app. I'll choose the foe type I'm going to fight. And then it'll say, okay, here's what you need to do to win. And you'll calculate your advantages, and then you'll basically get a task, and it's all about spending resources. There's different resources you get in the game. But what it'll tell you to do is it'll say, like, the first step might be lose 10 army. Army is a type of resource. Like, you get little guys to follow you around. It'll say lose 10 army. Well, if I have 10 army, like if I've got a crap ton of army, I can just say, yeah, I'll spend that. And then I move on to step 2, which might be lose 10 spirit. Now, maybe I don't have 10 spirit. If I don't have 10 spirit, I can still win, but my character has to take a corruption. However, if I have an advantage that matches the advantage type that works on this enemy, I can hit a button in the app that will basically say, okay, instead of losing 10 spirit,
I don't want to
lose 5.
Oh.
And by the way, you can keep spending advantages to improve those odds. So the tougher the enemy, the more like encounters you have to do. But you can spend those advantages strategically. And then there's even items that give you like wild advantages, meaning they match any type. So part of like what the game became for us is, I had items and abilities that were really strong against stealth and magic foes. And Matt was really strong against melee. And what was the one he was doing? I can't remember. There was another type that he had. But anyway, that's what the game became. Oh, and then the final thing that's really interesting is that at certain points of the game, dungeons will spawn on the map. So it'll say, place a dungeon in this space on the game board. And then you can go explore that dungeon, in which case now, and this is like the heaviest app integration part of the whole process, is it literally draws a map on the app. And you basically say, I want to go to this room, and something will happen in that room. It's like old school text adventure style. Like something will happen in this room. Maybe it'll be an encounter. Maybe you'll find an item. You don't know, and you're constantly sort of exploring this. And what's interesting is like it's a huge press your luck type scenario.
Got it.
Where you're going to go in there with a handful of resources and you're going to fight tough things or, have encounters with like NPCs or something that will require you to spend stuff. Remember, if you ever need to spend a resource and you don't have it, your character needs to take damage. That's a lose condition. So you want to be very careful. You could just like leave, like after an encounter, you're like, okay, I'm out. And then the next person that come in can pick up where you left off. Again, that's the heaviest app integration piece. And it's very, very straightforward. Makes it very, very easy to do. Now, 2 other quick notes. I played this game using my iPad, and it dawned on me as I was setting up, wait a minute, I'm playing this in my living room where my TV with an Apple TV is.
Oh, so did you AirPlay it onto the TV?
AirPlayed it onto the TV so we could all see.
Nice.
First of all,
nice.
Absolute game changer.
Yeah.
Right, because all the sound effects and music played through the speakers, like it was exquisite. I don't know why I never thought of doing something like that sooner, but it worked perfectly.
That's smart.
And then the final thing is that the tower, in addition to being the place where the skulls go in, that's also where the skulls come out. So at the bottom of the tower, there are, so even though it is a tower, quote unquote, there at the base of the tower, facing each sort of slice of the pie of the board, is a little chute. And after a turn, like skulls might get like just come out, and whatever side they come out on, you have to find a place for them to go, right? However, as the game progresses, the app will tell you a seal is becoming unbroken on the tower. And what that means is above the base, there are 3 tiers to the tower that are covered in little doors. Mm-hmm. And it'll say unseal, this side. It'll actually light up the side and it'll say, unseal this.
Neat.
And behind the seal is one of 2 things, either a symbol that lights up or more chutes. So like at one point I had like 6 skulls spit out on the side of the board. It was disgusting. But the other interesting thing that it does is that the symbols, like there might be a symbol that matches a certain activity type or a certain action type that you want to do. And what that means is now you have to spend resources to do that action as long as that symbol is facing your kingdom. at certain points of the game, it'll say, "Hey, the tower's getting ready to rotate. Get your fingers and your dick clear of all the holes," right? So because it like the thing rotates. So a symbol that was facing you might now be facing another direction. Maybe now you have an extra shoot, or maybe you have a different symbol that you need to contend with. It was just fun. And even though it took us about 2 hours to play, that's just because, first games always take a little bit longer. But in the 10 or 15 minutes that I've just explained this to you, like, I feel like I could teach people this game. And it's brilliant. It's got a cool theme. It's got great artwork, great assets. All the components are very, very nice. The app is very well done, very solid. And it's just a fun, good co-op game.
Sounds amazing.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. And we only played with 2 people, so kind of the open question that I have is, I wonder what the scaling is like with 4, because there were definitely points in the game where we sort of stopped focusing on some of the enemies on the board. And that was a mistake, because the longer they stay on the board, the app knows about that and they get stronger. And at one point, like, this dragon basically booked it literally across the map to cause massive damage to my character. Like, it was like, okay, all right, I guess we have to worry about this. Like,
yeah,
it was insane, but it was just a fun experience. It got a little tense just because we were running out of turns and we didn't have all the items we needed, and it just was a fun game. Again, it's not the best game I own. But it's a game that I feel I could get to the table with pretty much anybody, right? Whether it's a group of people that plays a lot of games, or maybe it's somebody's first taste of a cooperative game, I would almost have no problem getting this to the table just as I would Pandemic, although I think Pandemic's theme is a little more approachable because this is more of like a high fantasy thing, and that's not to everybody's liking, right? And Pandemic is a little more modern, and we think in terms of things a little bit different with real places. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it was a very enjoyable game. The integration was very, very well done. And the next game that I have, which I really want you to come see this.
Yeah.
I want to try it with 4.
You tell me when, Drew. I'll be there.
Maybe next weekend, buddy.
Okay.
We'll see. Maybe.
Let's do it.
Okay. There's 2 topics left on here. I don't think I can do any of these in 8 minutes. Which one do you want to hear? We'll move to the next one to next week.
I really want to hear. I want to hear about your trip in the U-Haul, Drew. As much as I think our listeners want to hear about the other one, I think that one needs to do us more justice. So
all right, yeah. So spoiler alert: Drew's Computer Corner is coming back in episode 159. Yeah, I won't have time to go into this here, but so we're recording this on a Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
We normally record on Thursdays. However, this past Thursday, I had a hell of a day. So the short version of this is I needed to rent a U-Haul. My father is in the process of moving us to South Carolina. And the reason I needed to rent a U-Haul was the plan was to drive back to Pennsylvania and actually pick up some furniture from him. Look, I don't have a truck. And even if I did, turns out, even if I did, the furniture that I was going to pick up wasn't going to fit. So I went online, I rented a U-Haul, and I needed to drive this thing all the way back to Pennsylvania.
That's quite a drive. Yeah. For a U-Haul. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's 3 hours in a car where I can set the cruise control for 75 and not worry about it. In a U-Haul,
it's like 4 days.
It's like it was door to door about 4 hours. Oof. Because I think those things are governed.
Yeah.
And I don't think I ever got that truck above 65.
Yeah.
And I spent
a
fuck ton on gas.
Oh yeah.
And it's not even diesel. Like, they don't even make diesel ones anymore that you can rent because they got tired of people screwing them up.
Right.
So this was just all gas. But anyway, so the main piece of furniture I needed to go get was this apothecary. And I have an uncle that is like a master at finding great pieces of furniture at antique stores, flea markets, old pharmacies. He's great at this. And he has several like old pharmacy apothecaries in his house. Some are very tall and skinny with the little drawers, Some are a little bit wider and thick boys. This is on the thicker side. So it is a kind of a 3 foot high, it's 3 foot high, 7 foot long with wooden drawers, and it's made out of solid wood. Paul, this piece of furniture without the drawers in it is probably 400 pounds.
I was going to say, that sounds heavy. Yeah.
It's exceptionally heavy. So I called my buddy, I called friend of the show, Scott, who's been my friend of mine for a very long time. And I said, hey, this is going to sound weird. What do you got going on Thursday? Because I really just need somebody to ride with me to Pennsylvania. And Scott is one of those guys who I've known. He was one of the first real friends I made when I moved to Ohio, because I met him at my first job here, and he was the best man at my wedding. Like, we just go way back. Great dude. So I asked him, and he's like, yeah, because, and I would do the same thing for him in a heartbeat. So the plan was this. I was going to pick up the U-Haul at 7. I figured on 3.5 to 4 hours to my dad's, with stopping for gas or whatever else would come up. Get there, load the thing on the truck, probably grab lunch somewhere in my hometown just to show my buddy Scott like I actually came from a place.
Right.
And then hop back in the U-Haul and book it back to Ohio. Hopefully get back in time for dinner, or maybe I could still go to the gym. That was like optimistic Drew. So, so first of all, I got to say, I've rented probably 3 rental trucks in my entire life. I rented one to move to Ohio. I rented one when we moved into our house, our first house. And I also rented another one. I rented like a big truck to pick up a bunch of stuff and take it to like a donation center one time. Technology has been kind to the rental truck industry. It was exceptionally easy to rent the truck. It was like, when do you need it? Which one do you want? Where do you want to pick it up? Reservation guaranteed. We got you, fam.
Nice.
Like, paid all, put the deposit down online, showed up at 7 a.m. My truck was there. Super easy. As soon as you get in the truck, like, you get a text message where it's like, hey, validate the mileage, validate the fuel level. Does it match what we have in our records? No, take a picture. Like, it was actually, from a nerdy like tech perspective, it was actually really cool. So we drive back to Pennsylvania, and we get there, and the top piece of wood comes off of this thing. All the drawers come out. The drawers alone were probably 30 to 35 pounds each.
Oof.
So my dad thankfully had some furniture movers, like the furniture dollies.
Oh,
so
nice.
like we were able to like get it on that and get it out of his house. And it took like all 3 of us. And I really didn't want my dad to help, but there was just really no way around it. Like, Scott and I lifted it up like onto the bed, and then he was like pushing from the back, and we got it loaded. We got it loaded on the truck, and like Scott and I looked at each other and like, we're gonna need more guys to get this off this truck. So we had lunch, and I took him downtown in my hometown, and we had lunch, and then we drove back. We honestly didn't get back, and I texted you when we had stopped for gas on the way home, and I said, man, I'm not going to be back in time, because by the time we got to my house and I had to call up some other friends, they came over, and it was a whole spectacle of getting this thing off the truck. And then I had to get the truck back to the place, and then I bought everybody dinner as like a thank you. And it just got super late. Right. Mm-hmm. So it was like a no bueno type thing, but man, that thing was so fucking heavy.
Yeah.
It's so fucking heavy. I mean, it is solid wood. And the saving grace of it is that the thing did have wheels. So that's more of a blessing and a curse. And again, because of my generalized anxiety, like I had like cargo straps that like secured the thing in the truck. But the longer we drove, occasionally, I would like change lanes, and I would kind of hear stuff shift in the back, and I'm like,
yeah.
uh-oh. So like I would stop at a rest stop and check it, just because, much like me checking my garage door every time I leave the house, I wanted to make sure like this wasn't going to come flying out of the back of the truck, because there's that door on that truck was an inch thick. There's no way it was going to stop that piece of furniture from flying out the back. And I as loud as an event like that would be, I would be the second person to know. The first person that would know is whoever that thing fell on top of as it was flying out the back.
Oof.
Yeah. And like, again, I'm from southwestern Pennsylvania. So like we get the thing loaded in the truck, and like we're weaving up and down these hills, and I hear like weird noises from the back of the truck, and I'm like, oh no, this is not good. Why did I agree to do this the whole time?
Oh.
But anyway, it was good. It was just a long, long day. And, I took a day off of work to do it, and I'm going to probably have to go back and help my dad load up a truck and everything. And that's sad. It's going to be hard with him being a little further away, but he'll be closer to some other relatives we have. So that's not a total loss, but still, I mean, right now, at least for the next couple of weeks, he's still 3 hours away, but that's going to change. And, we'll just have to find ways to make sure we can still see each other. And that's just hard.
Yeah, that is hard. Yeah.
But anyway, that was my big adventure, and we'll save the other topics for next week, because much like your teaser, I also have a side project that I'm working on that I might be ready to talk about come next episode.
But I'm just gonna pencil it in. Hold on, pause. I might give you a teaser tonight after the show.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Tickle my ass with a feather. All right, and then Drew's. I got to put mine in there. Drew's. Mine, I'll be honest, my big news probably won't be ready next week.
Okay.
Because I'm at the mercy of the state.
Oh okay.
Yeah, don't worry.
Okay.
All right, let's wrap this one up then. This has been a good one.
Hey, yeah, this is a good episode. We're on the internet doingtheirbest.com. We're on Twitter at doingbestpod. I'm on Twitter at Paul Baylor. And where can we find you, Drew?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at Pittfurg, Pittfurg.
All right, everybody. Thanks for listening.